It is, at first glance, a bed. Within this timber, however, lies not only the story of a man whose fear propelled him to the fringes of the human experience, an inventor who trampled atop the precipice of obsession as displaced rocks below him tumbled into the abyss of mania, his footing secured only by his redemptive desire to protect his family, but also a shotgun. This is the inevitable rise and horrifying fall of GunBed. The decrepit among you may recall the time when GunBed was the most desired and good product on Earth. Everyone owned a GunBed or knew someone cooler than them who did. GunBed was too big to fail. Or was it? Yes, it was. For now. We begin in Michigan, 2015, with a website and a promise. A bed frame that could render a sleeping civilian into a deadly home defender in 1 to 2 seconds.
By pressing on the door, the access panel, it takes substantial pressure to open it.
A GunBed puts you in control of a violent home invasion and protects you and your family. Today I'm going to reveal for the first time the true and shocking story behind the quick draw sack and the dark truth behind its enigmatic creator. GunBed's pitch was powerful. Dogs can be poisoned, alarms can be defeated, pistols are marginal, shotguns are terminal. GunBed wasn't furniture. Increasing crime, society breakdown, desperate criminals, zombie apocalypse. In these turbulent times, GunBed was hope.
Responsibly protect our families and our homes with firearms.
Remember, this was 2015, a time when it could just be a matter of time before even safe neighborhoods could start to look like war zones. Hiding a shotgun in a bed just seemed like a good idea. It's the kind of idea you wish you'd thought of first. When I began this investigation, I, like you, knew nothing. But now, I don't. I know lots. But first, who am I? What makes me, an open mic comedian, qualified to discuss such issues of GunBed? Hi. To think of GunBed as one man's invention, however, is to misunderstand. The story of GunBed is not one of any individual, but rather of a myth. It's here on this exhumed webpage we learn the tale of John. They laughed and said I was paranoid when I got a new GunBed, a few weeks after the dollar collapsed. But instantly, I became my family's hero. Here, the author begins the story with a hook, a narrative device first invented by VFX artist React.
What? No. That's gotta be Siege, dude.
The 6 o'clock news anchor said that the last government bailouts is apparently a failure. Many countries were no longer using the dollar as a world currency standard. Some people decided they would be better off with a life of crime rather than living like livestock in a pen at an animal factory. During this time, people were dying in overcrowded government camps. Every FEMA camp across the country now had mass graves dug not far from the camp. Life outside the camp wasn't much better. There were gunshots and homes being ransacked and pillaged every single night. One must remember, this was 2015. And it is here we meet our hero. John was a regular guy, much like you, and joined the rat race many consider to be chasing the American dream. But something had happened that threatened all of those dreams, and it started with the events of the market crash of 2008. So, John, being a guy who would do anything to help almost anyone, began searching for ways to tell if there was a threat to our way of life here in America. What he learned was frightening. Every fiat currency has a lifespan of about 100 to 200 years, and we were well over the 200-year mark. But this is America. We are different. This country was built on good values and morals with integrity. We should be safe, right? Then, one fateful night, just like any other night, a strange vehicle was driving down his street, going noticeably slower than the posted 25-mile-per-hour limit. The car held two unsavory, violent-looking men. They seemed to be studying each house in the neighborhood, carefully talking and pointing as they moved down the street. He loaded his pistol and placed it on the nightstand. There, that should do it, he said to himself. Despite baring his arm, John didn't feel safe. In the morning, they awoke to the sound of police and ambulance sirens. Shortly afterwards was a pounding on the door. It was part of the police SWAT team. They were looking for a couple of criminals whose car was still in the neighborhood. John looked down the street and saw the same car, the one he saw earlier, inching through the street looking for a victim. An eerie feeling was in the air. Now, here our hero John surely found himself in a predicament. I mean, according to this telling, John could, in his field of vision, see simultaneously both the police and the very suspects the police were looking for. Why then did John not point this out to the SWAT fellas? The officers were there for the very purpose of finding suspects, and one would assume John saying something along the lines of, "Sorry to interrupt, officers, but there's actually some suspects behind you right now," would be a welcome interjection. Perhaps John was paralyzed by the aforementioned eerie feeling. We've all been to Docklands. Or perhaps John worried that this thing went all the way to the top, and he didn't want to find himself in one of the Michiganian mass graves that was so prevalent at the time. Anyway, a few weeks later, John ran into his neighbor at the store. His arm was in a sling, and he had scars left behind from stitches above his eye. One night, his neighbor was woken by a tapping on the head. A man with a metal bar was standing above his bed. He saw a second man at the foot of his bed with a pistol pointing directly at him. The first man asked if he had any guns in the house. John thought to himself it was a good thing he didn't have a gun in the nightstand or under the mattress. John swallowed hard, wishing he had a better solution, but knew he would not have been any better off. As they are wont to do, his neighbor continued. One of the men demanded he take them to the safe and open it. He tried to stall. After 20 minutes of beatings, he finally got it open. The next thing he remembers, he was getting cold water dumped on his head, and he was placed in the bathtub. He couldn't see his wife anywhere, but heard her muffled crying. By this time, a small group of concerned listeners was starting to form right there in the store. Someone in the crowd said they read an article that stated as desperation goes up, criminals and even normal people will form groups in order to survive. These people become more organized and violent as they progress. John's neighbor and his wife got a divorce. She no longer felt safe with him. I can't help but wonder if John felt any responsibility here. He had essentially denied his neighbors the opportunity for closure when he allowed the only suspects to make a low-speed getaway as they traveled by the scene of the crime noticeably slower than the posted 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. More likely, John was too preoccupied with his own marriage, as he started to come to the conclusion that his wife was losing confidence in him. Neither of them wanted to put bars on the windows and make their home feel like a prison, but they did need to feel safe, and moving wasn't the answer because they were already in a respectable neighborhood. Fuck. John decided to take a gun training class. He learned that police and firearm training instructors consider a shotgun to be the best choice for defending your home. They taught that a shotgun has much greater short-range stopping power, and statistics showed that more people survived a pistol shot. Spirits were getting higher. John asked the instructor what he would do if he found himself in his friend's situation. The instructor got a very concerned look and then joked that no one could sneak up on him. Haha. The instructor never answered the question, a technique I have also found to be useful. Despite his training, John continued to wonder what if the villains came back to their neighborhood? What if they increased in numbers, firepower, or violence? More importantly, he didn't want to lose his wife's weakening confidence in him as the protector and provider. John's neighbor lost everything in one unexpected event. He lost his gold and silver coin collection, his wife's valuable jewelry, his comfortable home, and even his wife. John resorted to a Google search of quick draw furniture shotgun, and he discovered the GunBed website. That's right, if you thought you were hearing the story of GunBed's inventor, you just got. John is just a customer. We haven't even gotten to the real guy yet. The GunBed seemed expensive at first, but after some research he found it was actually priced about the same as any other solid wood bed frame. As the economy continued to fall and crimes were on the rise, John called the number from the GunBed website in desperation. When the GunBed arrived, John thought it would be best to inspect it right there at the back of the truck. It was made of top quality wood and very well constructed. But as John is reminded, there are no GunBeds in hell, and as such, the devil doesn't sleep. As John admired his new purchase, he noticed a shadowed figure in the fringes. Someone was watching him, looming just out of sight, hiding in the recesses of distant shrubbery, studying him. He looked dirty, dark, and unshaven. This was not the first time John had seen people watching his neighborhood, and he knew it was not going to be the last. In the house, John found the setup was easy. He suggested his wife lie down beside him. After pressing the tip board and the shotgun dropped into his hands, he quickly pointed it at the door. John's wife smiled, and she had restored confidence in her husband's ability to protect their little family. John kept seeing the dark figure in his mind, but he found it was easier to sleep and provide a safe haven because of his new security, all thanks to GunBed. Despite now living in the veritable Zion that is the GunBed's vicinity, John was still haunted by visions of dark and dirty men. I might just say dirty men, and we leave John to a hopeful but uncertain fate. While the story of John is really, really good, is it true? Was John a real man? And if so, was he able to avoid the camps? Although, isn't it irrelevant? What of the author, the inventor? When I began this journey, all I had was this video. But in the course of my investigation, I was able to uncover a name. Who the shit is Frank Edwards? While records of the man are scarce, Frank describes himself as a man sculpted by grief. Being widowed twice at the age of 45, I realized the value of human life. I wanted to do my part to protect myself and my family. In former iterations of GunBed.net, we get an insight into the true origin of GunBed, an inciting incident that lit the spark of inspiration and hurtled Frank towards the revelation that it would be a good idea to put a gun in a bed. Here we learn this wasn't a supermarket powwow like it was for John, but rather something even more plausible. One day my grandkids came over and ran down the hall to my room, where I always had a shotgun beside the bed, wanting to protect them, in this case, from themselves. That's right, Frank found himself in a position none of us would find ideal, pointing a shotgun at his grandchildren. One moment, two near-blasted blighters changed everything. To say, however, that this event alone inspired GunBed is insufficient. If everyone who pointed weapons at their family had good ideas, you'd be watching Steven Crowder. In response to the double infanticide he'd narrowly avoided, Frank decided to do some stuff about the house. I thought long and hard about a better place to store that ugly shotgun. While his capacity to differentiate between the sound of his grandkids and the sound of home invaders would remain poor, Frank found the firearm dropped safely into his arms with the muzzle pointing above his partner's head. To understand Francis, we need to delve into his soul and ask the question, what does he fear? Imagine lying in bed at night when you are almost asleep. There is a disturbance that slightly awakens you. Ice falling off the roof, raccoons, coyotes, or even wild pigs. You become restless, wondering if you could be the next victim of a home invasion. So there you have it. The chain of logic responsible for birthing GunBed has finally been revealed. Our story, however, does not end there. As Frank would soon learn, a war was coming. But first, what are we to make of our customer, John, and his epic fucking poem? Throughout the years on GunBed.net, the story of John and the real-life story of Frank have had much overlap.
Well, I have a friend who woke up in the middle of the night with two armed criminals in his bedroom.
It is therefore hard to escape the conclusion that John is nothing more than a fabrication, a conceit of Frank's imagining designed for the sole purpose of moving wood. Although I think in a way this conclusion misses the point. John may not be a real man, but maybe he's more real than anyone. You see, John is you. John is me. John is your papa. John is, after all, a regular guy. GunBed was going good and enjoying heaps and heaps of success when suddenly something changed. GunBed was out of stock. This was the worst thing that could have possibly happened from a GunBed stock perspective. With no other information, the bednecks went ape.
People in Belgium took to the streets to protest.
A couple of years later, once the unrest had quietened, people started to wonder, is GunBed really gone? And what of Frank? Had even GunBed failed to stop him falling victim to the marauding and the mischievous? Had Frank simply exceeded his lifespan like a 200-year-old fiat currency? On the other hand, if GunBed had survived the carnage of 2015, surely it could survive anything. For you see, Frank Edwards wasn't retreating, but advancing. You're retreating. Somehow, in 2022, GunBed returned. Not only with a new line of gun beds, but also GunBed gun shells, GunBed stubbies, a new GunBed website, and GunBed logo. Wow. Orders poured in like sweat down Prince Andrew's shirt, despite the fact he doesn't sweat, or didn't at the time. GunBed's metaphorical stock blasted upwards like a slug, leaving a shotgun held by a grandfather startled by his skydiving grandchildren. However, not much is known of Frank Edwards during these ripper times. The only window we have into the state of the elusive creator is an AMA, in which the inventor conversed with his stupid fans. Here, I choose to imagine Frank as a man finally at peace, resting securely in the knowledge that even if the dirty men come, his contraption can present him with a loaded shotgun, the optimal weapon for home defense, at a price point comparable to other solid bed frames on the market. Call him a sick because he's catching disease. For Frank, it probably seemed as if the good times would never end. But then, they did. Or did they? Yes. For the second and final time, GunBed was gone. With nothing to wet their hickory-hankering beaks on, the bedheads were left to speculate. Perhaps Frank Edwards really was gone this time. No one knows. Except me. And for the first time, I'm going to reveal what really happened. Frank was lying in bed one night, contented, his wife sleeping peacefully beside him, her mind now free of divorceful thoughts. His wealth was secured in gold, insulated from the volatility of fiat currency, and his immediate physical safety was secured by a pump action just a few pounds of pressure away, when suddenly there was a noise. Frank didn't really have a good ear for these things, but even he could detect the unmistakable sound of marauders. And what's more, the sound was coming from inside the house. His bedroom door flung open, two masked criminals encroached, their dirty arms outstretched, guns on their hips. The masked men stopped and assumed their positions, doing that twiddly finger thing that indicates a shootout is about to occur. This was the moment Frank had prepared for. The marauders' hands shot towards their shooters, but Frank was faster. With a push on the headboard, the shotgun fell smoothly into his hands. He swung the barrel towards the attackers, on the way, knocking out his wife, who had just been startled awake. Bam bam, 2 shots, 2 hits. The freshly blasted marauders flew back into the wall. Frank got out of bed and moved towards them, ready to confirm the kills. It was then the marauders removed their balaclavas and revealed themselves. Frank beheld their visage, and with it there came an understanding so large it left no room for sanity. The marauders were, in fact, Frank's grandchildren. They had returned to exact vengeance for the fright he'd given them all those years ago. Taking advantage of Frank's horror, the douchier grandchild pulled their ankle blade and threw it into Frank's heart. Frank collapsed back onto GunBed, his blood soaking into the timber, Frank's body merging with his creation as the crane shot pulled back. His face reflected no pain, only contentment. GunBed had worked perfectly, Frank thought to himself, before dying. Either that or he just stopped selling them. I don't. So what can we learn from GunBed? For me, this is the story of an ordinary man with courage enough to rest his head on his pillow every night, despite knowing full well the next time he wakes up it may be because he's being tapped on the head by a metal bar held by a gang of criminals and even normal people driven to increasingly violent acts by the declining US dollar. Personally, when I'm lying in bed at night, paralyzed by the noises of the night, instead of turning to my fiancée and whispering, "Sorry honey, but it appears it's our time to die," I can recline, stoically, in GunBed, stare directly into the gaping wound of civil decay and whisper, "There. That should do it." For when the night is darkest, darkest, and everything starts to feel all 2015, I think of John, our everyman, and remember how after purchasing GunBed, his wife didn't leave him, and everything was fine. Though be not without caution, for the shadow men do not rest. They are ever watching, ever waiting, ever ready. But thanks to GunBed, so are we.